Welcome back, everyone, to From the Stands. It's the college football show. We are in week 16, aka the conference championship week. Welcome if you are new. Two not new faces that we've had on for a few weeks in a row here. We have Andy from the University of Illinois and Tom from the University of Notre Dame. How are you guys doing this week?
Good, man. 12:30 turned into 6 o'clock real quick for the recording of this, but we're
Yep.
here. We're glad to be here. Conference championship week, baby. But I'm glad a few familiar faces here. Always glad to talk football, college football with you guys. I'm excited for the show.
Yeah, Brian. Looking forward to tomorrow. It's going to be a big game at 4 o'clock. These guys are going to have the ball out and potentially having the shot to keep Clemson out of the college football playoff. I know there would be a lot of things that would have to happen for that, but let me tell you something. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow, not just for that game, but all of these games.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot on the line tomorrow. But going back to last week quickly, we had our last week of the regular season. What games stood out to you guys for week 15 there?
Well, there's two, and two of them were late night games, and I think the first one we really need to talk about is the Florida LSU game. Let me tell you something. That was an outstanding finish. The kicker for LSU, I give him all the credit in the world, but trying to remember the guy's name, Marco, the cornerback for Florida.
Wilson.
Marco Wilson.
Marco Wilson.
Marco Wilson.
Like, what are you thinking, dude? Like, don't throw. I mean, Florida is probably missing out on the college football playoff a week earlier now because of a thrown shoe. I mean, what a clown. That's the game that sticks out the most to me.
Yeah, that moment.
In the words.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say that moment, you couldn't remember his name there, but I think Florida fans will not forget that name for years to come if Florida can't pull off an epic win on Saturday and maybe squeak something in for Florida there, because that was just, what a brain fart. I mean, there's no other way to put it. That was a ridiculous situation.
Terrible.
In the words of Austin Powers, who throws a shoe? Absolutely ridiculous. One of the all-time funniest things that has ever came out of a sports referee's mouth. Unsportsmanlike conduct. Florida player threw the LSU shoe 20 yards down the field. Like, how did he even get that out without laughing? He had no idea what to say. I've seen a couple posts that, this is getting people, Florida fans, obviously on Twitter, pretty upset about it, but they're like, they just cost his quarterback a chance at the Heisman and a statue out in front of the swamp, which, I mean, Kyle Trask is having an amazing season. I still think he has an opportunity to win that Heisman with a great performance here against Bama in the SEC championship game. But yeah, there's hard not to talk about LSU Florida. That was one of the craziest finishes I've seen in quite a long time. As far as games that stuck out to me, so my Illini 28-10 to Northwestern, they lose. The terrible game, but there's a bright side here, ladies and gentlemen. The Lovie Smith era is over in Champaign. Lovie has been relieved of his duties. And I'm pretty excited about it. You know, I don't like to see anybody lose their job, especially in the uncertainties of this world that we have right now. But this is year 5 and total record of 17-39 overall, not getting the wins done. Just especially this year, his team was getting exposed. They just regressed heavily. They did have issues with the coronavirus. Were missing players throughout the year. We're down to their 4th string quarterback at one time. So I get it. There were a lot of other factors here, but the team just regressed. Like I said, his Tampa 2 defense, he tried to bring in from the NFL, just does not work at the college level. It doesn't have the athletes that he did on those amazing Bears teams. And obviously when he was a defensive coordinator in the NFL as well, if they didn't force turnovers, the defense was toast. They're going to give up 1,000,000 yards. We saw it last week. 2 different Northwestern rushers ran for over 100 yards, I believe. They had 400 total yards rushing. That just can't happen. Thanks to Lovey, everything you did, laying the foundation for the rebuild for this program. He led the charge for brand new facilities. So now Illinois does have a brand new facility that's super nice for all the players and stuff like that. That's helped with recruiting. A couple guys I'd like to mention that have been mentioned as candidates here. Former Wisconsin head coach Brett Bielema. He's got a big ass Iowa tattoo on his leg. You can leave. I'm just kidding. We could do a lot worse. I know. We could. I know he is a good coach for the Giants. He's proved that he knows how to win in the Big Ten. We could do a lot worse than Brett Bielema. He wouldn't be my first choice. He's got a 97-58 overall head coaching record in college football. He's from Prophetstown, Illinois, which is by Chicago, so he knows the area. Where I'm not liking this is, his 29-34 overall record at Arkansas didn't really go well there, but he was 68-24 in his 7 years at Wisconsin. He knows how to win in the Big Ten. But if it's me, the way college football is going, I'd rather go after a younger guy or a coordinator. A couple other guys that are already head coaches that have already been mentioned. I'll just name these two and then I'll shut up. Lance Leepole from Buffalo. Last 3 seasons, he's 23-9, leading the Bulls, and they currently average 50 points a game this year. The question with him is, could he recruit at the Big Ten level, which would is a very good question, especially if you're in the state of Illinois. You need to be able to recruit Chicago and now St. Louis very heavily as well. And then Jeff Monken, Army head coach, somebody you're probably a little familiar with, Thomas. So the question is he going to bring the triple option here? I don't think that's going to work in a Big Ten Power 5 setting. I mean, depending on a few things, but I have heard rumblings that he could potentially run the spread here, do a new system. He's actually from Peoria. Illinois has family ties in Champaign. One of his cousins is an athletic director actually at my former high school. He attended Millikan University in Decatur. So there are Illinois ties here. They're going after, these are all rumblings. Obviously, I don't work in the athletic department. I don't know anything. I'm just a fan. But, he's 48-38 overall record in Army and 3-0 in bowl games. I'd love to go get a guy like Tom Manning from Iowa State, Sean Lewis from Kent State's a young guy, maybe Jim Leonard up at Wisconsin as well. I'd like them to go young and get a coordinator, maybe offensive, maybe defensive, but a Power 5 coordinator, I think, is the way to go here.
Okay. Very interesting. Two games that I'll just touch on very quickly. The first one, just because we talked about it last week, being a big game, North Carolina versus Miami. I think the big thing we agreed on was that Miami needed to stop the rush, letting up about 150 yards a game, usually 554. Not great. You can't give up over 500 yards of rushing to that duo down there in North Carolina. You're going to lose badly, and they did lose badly. So North Carolina deserving that win. And then also USC versus UCLA, that very, very late comeback win, 16 seconds left. Slovis kind of saves the day. And I just want to bring that one up because it'll segue perfectly into our next segment. Some elevator pitches. For anyone who watches or likes to watch movies and is into the Oscars, once it gets close to awards season, people will start making their pitches. Some don't make as much sense as others. But one of those people is Larry Scott, who had this to say: I'm still holding out some hope. I know the committee is going to watch the game, and depending on how USC does, they continue to improve and look as good as they have. We're hoping they'll be in the discussion for a playoff spot, but certainly being ranked number 13 does not come close to reflecting where we think they deserve to be right now. Are you guys buying that elevator pitch from Mr. Scott here, or is that a little bit too off the mark here, and USC is a bit far off to make any legitimate shot at the playoff here? Andy?
I think I buy it more than the other two things we're about to go over, but just because they are undefeated. They did struggle to beat ASU only by 1. They only beat an Arizona team by 4, who that Arizona State hung 70 on and only allowed 7 points. And then you mentioned Slovis, that late TD pass to St. Brown with 16 seconds left on Saturday to take the lead and cover the spread, I might add. That was nice. I think it does hurt that they are playing a 2-loss Oregon team in the Pac-12 title game after Washington did have to pull out due to COVID issues. But I'm all for the teams that are undefeated getting in. I know it'd be kind of hypocritical for me to say that I'd put a 6-win Ohio State team in, but not a 6-win USC team in. So I think I have to buy this if I'm going to jump on the Ohio State should be in the playoff train. But I guess there is something to be said about like the Pac-12 starting so late. Maybe they shouldn't be rewarded for waiting so long. But there are other teams that I think are a little bit more deserving. Like I'd rather see Cincinnati there. I mean, while we're on the topic of the playoff committee, absolutely ridiculous that Iowa State is a 2-loss team at 6, Florida a 2-loss team at 7, 13. Iowa State's 13 spots ahead of Louisiana Lafayette, who beat them by 17 in Ames. Yep. Doesn't make any sense. Coastal Carolina beat Louisiana Lafayette. They're still 6 spots behind the Cyclones. No shade on the Cyclones. They're playing great football right now. But you cannot have those 2 losses and be that high, in my opinion. Give them New Year's Six Bowl, absolutely. But come on, I think you're really just fucking over these G5 teams. That give one of them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm going to agree here, being a UCF fan here down in the American Conference. Tom, you buying Larry Scott's elevator pitch here to the CFP?
Not for 1 second. I mean, they barely survived UCLA last week. I think they're going to have to destroy Oregon in the Pac-12 title game to even be flirted with in that discussion. Yes, this would be their second straight Pac-12 title win, but you brought up that Washington had to back out, Andy. A win over them would have been a lot more impressive than a win over Oregon, in my opinion. But,
absolutely.
You know, there's teams that are in similar spots, and I know we'll get to them in just a moment, but yeah, if you're Larry Scott, I mean, you can't be complaining because the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, they played all year long, or all season long. So you can't come out now and start complaining, you know. So that's just my take on it. But we will see what happens this weekend with these games. So it's going to be interesting, but I'm not buying this at all.
Okay, and moving on. The second pitch came out a little bit earlier than Larry Scott's. We have Dabo Swinney saying this about the ACC. I think the fact that we're going to have 11 games as well as the SEC teams, you look at Florida and Texas A&M and Alabama, these teams are going to have 11 games this year. It's incredible. And I think the Big Ten had the same opportunity and they chose not to play. And I think the only reason they ended up playing is because of the leadership of the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. And have demonstrated that we can do it and do it in a safe way. This is kind of the ultimate shade comment here. The first part makes a little sense, and then you can tell he's going after the Big Ten with that second part of the quote, talking about the leadership of the SEC, the ACC, etc. Tom, do you think this is enough of a buffer, I guess, to give Clemson? This feels like if Clemson loses, he wanted this to make his point, I guess, that a 2-loss Clemson still is deserving over those teams that have played less games. Are you buying that?
Well, they had over a week to prepare for Notre Dame without Trevor Lawrence, and the only reason why Dabo is bringing this up is because he lost to the Irish. If he'd be keeping his mouth shut right now, real pretty in one of those top 2 spots, and he's not there. Now he's scared because he knows a 2-loss team has never made the college football playoff. So to be a 10.5-point favorite against Notre Dame with Trevor Lawrence, and now you're sitting here complaining about Ohio State. If you didn't lose that first game, look, I understand you can't control Trevor Lawrence getting COVID, but you had over a week to prepare without him. And DJ was pretty good at quarterback for them. So don't come around now and start to plead your case to the committee. It's basically telling me you're not confident tomorrow going into Notre Dame. And for sure as heck, you won't cover the spread either.
Yeah, that's kind of how it read to me as well.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, all of these that we're talking about, I feel like the coaches kind of had to make these quotes. It's posturing, it's politicking at this point. But it's just, to me, Clemson and Dabo have never been a team to lack confidence. I feel the same way about Saban with Alabama. And like you said, this is kind of like a scared comment to make. You know, he sort of reinforcing, you know, hey, we might go into this with 2 losses, but consider us, please. So right. Just a little bit off brand, I would say, from Dabo. Andy, you buying this one?
I'll get that out of here. I'm not buying this. I get it. I get what they're saying. Yes, they played a full schedule. And I mean, with our next one, it's kind of more of the same. But I mean, Ohio State, they did have 3 games canceled. One was by them, of course, because they were scared to play the Illini. Everybody knows that. Taking a page actually out of Dabo Swinney's playbook with that one. When I say those, they were scared, and then 2 by their opponents. So there were a couple that were out of their control, but that is the craziness of college football this year. I mean, but they have dominated pretty much everybody besides Indiana. So, they beat Indiana 42-35, only by 7. The next closest game was Penn State by 13. If you watch that Penn State game, it was not that close. Penn State kind of had a late rally to get it within 2 scores. But I don't know. I mean, I've said it on this show before. I support Ohio State being in the college football playoff. I think just by their brand name, especially with Justin Fields, who this probably is his last season in college football, they're going to go for ratings. We've talked about it on this show before, just the name, and you can see it in the college football rankings this week. They're putting the Big 12 and SEC teams with 2 losses over the little guys that are undefeated or have 1 loss. So I don't know. Just the game should matter is what I should have to say about the college football playoff. The committee, they're kind of proving these past couple weeks that they don't. But as far as Dabo's case against OSU, I mean, I'm not buying it. I think Tom nailed it when he said he's afraid that he's going to lose again to Notre Dame, and this is something we don't get to see a lot, folks. A fired up Tom Scavetta. I'm very here for that.
Doesn't happen often.
All right, and then moving into the third elevator pitch here, we have Dan Mullen, the coach of Florida, when asked about if a 2-loss Florida had a CFP shot. We'll think about that on Saturday night after we win. This is maybe the most egregious of all. I think everyone this season has caught at least one Alabama game and seen how dominant they are. As a coach, you do want to be confident, but this is maybe a little too far and setting yourself up for some trouble here. Adding on to that, he said, I think it showed respect for us. This is talking about their previous game. And for this league, the quality of the opponents and the SEC, the grind and the demand of playing. This is our 11th SEC game in the season. I think that's certainly a challenge other conferences haven't been through. So a little bit like Dabo there, calling out the lack of games. Is this a good enough pitch for Florida here, who, let's assume they win this game on Saturday? You think that's a good enough pitch, Andy?
No, you got to destroy Alabama. It has to be a statement win for them to even have a conversation about this. And then you're going to have to hope for some other upsets as well. I get it. You played the full schedule. 11 games in the SEC is tough. But don't act like you didn't lose to a dog shit LSU team this last week. Like, shows the respect that they have for the conference. It's called SEC bias. We all know, if you're a college football fan, you know how that goes. They will do anything they can to get as many SEC teams up as highly ranked as possible. But I thought it was funny that when he said that he was talking about the 11th SEC game, where he's like, yeah, I don't want to take any shots to other schools, but you decided teams that have only played 6 or 7 games will be fresher and have more depth. Like, that's a direct shot at the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Like, You don't want to take shot. Like, he's the king. This is the same guy that wanted a full house at the Swamp earlier this year after Texas A&M handed them a big fat L. So I'm not buying anything Dan Mullen is saying. I would like to see them beat Alabama just for that narrative and for some chaos, because I think Kyle Trask is the best quarterback in college football this year. But it was definitely a bold move, Cotton, saying, yeah, we'll revisit the conversation after we beat Bama, because would they put a 2-loss Florida in over undefeated Ohio State, or what if Texas A&M dominates Tennessee on Saturday as well? So I think that's definitely a storyline to watch. But yeah, I'm not buying that. If you have 2 losses, I think there goes your argument right out the window.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I mean, regardless of the Marco Wilson shoe incident, the game shouldn't have been that close to begin with. LSU isn't good in any respect this year. I mean, which isn't entirely their fault. They had a lot of turnover. But when you're trying to make a case for the playoff and you've already got that one loss to Texas A&M, who granted, that's not to meme on it, but it's a quality loss there. A&M's sitting pretty high. You can't be doing that against a team like LSU. What about you, Tom? Is this Dan Mullen pitch good enough for you if they win on Saturday?
Well, if you expect to beat Alabama after losing to LSU, that's problem number one. Problem number two is that you also lost to Texas A&M, who is sitting one spot ahead of you, and they're probably going to beat Tennessee this weekend. Now, I understand Florida's in the SEC title game, Texas A&M is not, but that's only because of the way the conference is set up. You put Florida and Texas A&M in a game, it's very tight and competitive, right? So the way I look at this right now, Florida's going to have to destroy Alabama, as Andy said. Hope Northwestern beats Ohio State. Hope Notre Dame beats Clemson. And then maybe have like a 2% chance at that point of getting in. So, no, it's not happening. I'm not buying it. End of story. That's it. Brian, you could stick a fork in the Florida Gators.
All right. You guys have both said, and I agree with this point, it would take a massive blowout against Alabama for that to happen. How many points would you need Florida to win by to sneak in there?
30.
What, three or four score? Yeah, 30 points.
Okay.
Yeah. And I still think the committee would take a very hard look at Alabama and probably still put them in.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's just that LSU loss is killer, man. Who throws a shoe? Fucking Marco Wilson. You blew it. And you hate to say that it comes down to one play because, Thomas, you said it perfectly. You can't put yourself in that situation in the first place. It shouldn't have been that close.
Yeah.
But it just absolutely killer. But you have to shout out Cole Tracy, LSU kicker, ice in his veins there to knock that yep. Go-ahead field goal down.
Yeah, that was very nice. I was kind of happy for all the things that LSU has been through this year. It was kind of nice and obviously funny to watch them take down the Gators there. I don't think Gators fans found it as funny, but it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Moving on to our next segment, we're going to do a quick buy or sell here with some topical segments. First up, we have the Heisman winner will come from the team that wins the SEC championship on Saturday. Buy or sell on this, Andy?
I'm buying. I absolutely think it's a race between Mac Jones and Kyle Trask right now. I think in order for Trask to win the Heisman, I think he's going to have to put up about 350, 400, and 3 scores, really put on a show. We know what this offense can do with Mac Jones. So for the year, Mac Jones is 217 for 284, 3,321 yards, 27 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Trask, on the other hand, 259 for 369, 3,717 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. I apologize, something going on out there. But, yeah, I absolutely think this is what needs to – or I'm sorry, he distracted me. I absolutely think the Heisman winner comes out of this game. And what about Devonta Smith? Like, I know that it's really hard for receivers, but he's been putting on a show. Dark horse candidate for me, 83 receptions on the year, 1,327 yards, 15 touchdowns, 16 yards per catch for the Alabama wideout. He's having an amazing year.
Tom?
So when I look at these two Heisman candidates, I see a lot of similarities, but Trask is a year older, so you think the seniority factor would come into play, and he is the leading passer in the nation. However, I look at Mac Jones. He's completed over 76% of his passes, and you look at the ratings these two players have against top 25 opponents. Mac Jones absolutely shreds Kyle Trask. Mac Jones is at 232.7. Trask is at 191.2. Bama is likely to win the game this weekend, and we're going to see a great performance all around from Jones, Najee Harris, Devonta Smith. It's really too much at this point to ask if Kyle Trask, I think, is the front runner to win the Heisman Trophy, especially after a bad loss to LSU last week. And if they beat LSU, I would say it's more middle ground, like 50-50. But as of right now, I have to give Mac Jones the edge. And, Brian and Andy, I think your average fan will look at the numbers and say, oh, well, he has 13 more touchdown passes. Why wouldn't he win the Heisman? But at the same time, Mac Jones and the Crimson Tide, they've had a lot tougher games this year. And you have to remember something. Jones is a first-year starter, first-year full-time starter if you look at the big scheme of things, and he's only a junior. The Jacksonville native, you just look at what he's done this year, only 3 interceptions against SEC opponents is outstanding. Trask has thrown 5. So I think that's something you have to consider as well. I'm going Mac Jones.
Okay, so you're going not just yes or not just a buy, but you're going specifically Mac Jones. Okay.
Regardless of what happens, yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah, I'm not sure who I like the best, but I'm definitely buying on this. I think just by the way the season has played out the last few weeks, enough of the other who we would consider top candidates have dropped off enough to basically give the 4 people in this game enough space between Jones, Devonta Smith, Najee Harris, and Kyle Trask. Like you said, Trask, after that loss, is out of those 4 is definitely sitting in 4th. But I kind of like Devonta Smith here. Probably a long shot, but I think if you want to bet on this, you probably get some good odds going with Devonta Smith in the Heisman futures. The last wide receiver to win it was in 1991. That was Desmond Howard. So it's a rarity, I think, to say the least, that a wide receiver wins this award. But, I mean, regardless of his stats, regardless of the fact that he's got a Heisman candidate throwing him the ball, the way that Devonta Smith has been playing, the way that he's been scoring his touchdowns has been phenomenal. It's really a sight to see. It reminds me of like watching Calvin Johnson in the NFL. It's every catch is something spectacular, and I think at the very least I'd have him above Najee Harris for me. I think it's a weird season for Alabama because they're just so good. They're just on kind of cruise control here, so maybe I'm not giving Najee enough love. But yeah, I think if Devonta Harris has a good game this weekend, I think he's got a very good shot of making a surprise Heisman showing. Maybe at the very least, I'll give him second in the voting. I think that would be nice for him. And then next up for our buy or sell, we should nix the CFP committee and replace it with the BCS ranking system to choose our 4 teams. Obviously, this past week's rankings have been a little bit odd, to say the least. Andy kind of brought up a few of the teams that are in very weird spots. Cincinnati has dropped under the argument specifically. They said we haven't been able to see enough of them, having their weeks off, obviously, with canceled games. Yet Ohio State saw no movement down. So it's kind of, I mean, like it's G5 versus P5, obviously, but you can't really make that kind of argument. And then, it's a bit hypocritical when you don't say the same thing about Ohio State. Are you guys buying or selling, bringing back the BCS ranking system for the playoffs, Tom?
I'm selling that. And that's not saying I'm thrilled with the College Football Playoff Committee, but it needs to be changed and better represented. Greg McElroy ripped this committee apart. No one is more upset than the American Commissioner Mike Oresco of the AAC. How does Florida only drop 1 spot? That's a point we brought up earlier in the show. They lost to a team with 54 scholarship players and a true freshman at quarterback. Cincinnati dropped 1 spot for not playing, but their level of competition is not up to par either, so I could see why they did that. But with the way Florida lost, you can't do that to Cincinnati. We've mentioned before, no 2-loss team has ever made the college football playoff, so why is Florida still in the mix, according to these experts? Gary Barta, the chair of this committee, needs to fix things quickly. Not to mention, you want to know why Florida only dropped 1 spot, in my opinion. Keep in mind that Scott Strickland is on the committee. He's Florida's athletic director. So there you go, guys. That's probably – I'm not going to say that's the root of the issue here, but why are we sitting here at 6:30 on a Friday night having this discussion about Florida right now? There's a good chance that Scott Strickland is a big part of that reason. He's a part of the committee. It makes a lot of sense. It needs to be changed, but I am selling this point.
Okay. What quickly, if you're not going BCS system, what would you like to see them replace the committee with?
So I truthfully think they should go to 8 teams. Not necessarily next year, but they need to start putting the foot on the gas with that because you have these G5 conferences who are not happy. I think what they need to do over the next year or so, keep it at 4 teams, but you need to evaluate the teams evenly. You can't show SEC bias. I think they need to change people who are on this committee. I think these terms that they have and whatnot, it's not ending. I think the terms are too long for these people sitting on here because, quite frankly, people are mad every year regardless of what happens. So I think the terms probably need to be adjusted, Brian, and then they have to do something, speed up this 18 process. So that's kind of where I'm looking at with that, if that answers the question.
Okay. On the surface, I'm buying this one. I don't think it should go back to exactly the way that the BCS ran. I think the coaches poll, like you said, with Strickland on the committee, I think there's, it's too much politicking. I mean, again, this really, you can't have someone sitting in there making a case for their team thinking that they're doing it in an unbiased way, especially in a situation like this. So I would probably like to see the coaches poll drop out, and maybe a little tinkering with the way the computer polls are allowed in. Like maybe rotate those. Like you're saying, you need quicker rotation of committee members. Now, how you'd like to see that? But yeah, I think if we go to 8 teams, either would be acceptable. You're still going to get arguments around the 8, 9, 10 range, but at the very least, you're getting in the core of who you need to in spots, number 1 through 5. I don't think there'd be ever any argument about those. So I'm buying it. Maybe rose-tinted glasses here from me on the way the BCS has been run in the past, but the committee is not up to par, at least in terms of, I guess, representing the G5 teams here from my point of view. Andy, you buying or selling?
I think Thomas is absolutely right here, guys. I'm selling this. The BCS, I guess you're just a big computer guy, huh, Brian? You just cut out the human error. Yeah, I'm just messing around. But yeah, I still think the BCS left teams out as well that might have been deserving of a shot back when that was still the format. But change the college football playoff committee. I mean, Gary Barta, he's the AD at Iowa. We expect anything good to come out of Iowa? No, absolutely not. But you did mention that point about the Florida athletic director. I believe the original CFP committee, or at one point, Rob Mullins, the Oregon athletic director, was in charge of it, was the head. And at that time, Oregon was in the conversation for the playoff. And I do remember him being on ESPN getting interviewed and said he would always excuse himself from the room when they were talking about the Ducks. So I'm curious to see if that still holds up, if the Florida AD had to leave the room. But I also like what you said about their terms. I think why not a new committee every year? Why not change it up so there is no thought of, hey, this is just going to be the same 4 teams, which we have seen it featured heavily as the same 4 teams. That being said, they are the best teams in college football right now. They are very good, but this year has just been quite ridiculous from the college football playoff committee. I mean, I'm definitely for the playoff. I'd love to see 8 teams. I think that will shut a lot of people up about who should be in, who shouldn't be in, why, and then what's stopping the G5 teams from starting a tournament of their own. At this point, if they see themselves keep getting frozen out of the college football playoff, what's stopping them from naming a Final Four from the American, the Sun Belt, Conference USA, or what have you? I think that is maybe a long shot, but I mean, at this point, like what are these conferences going to do to fight back, if anything? But I don't really know if the BCS is the right system. I like the idea of the committee, but they are not executing it very well this season, in my opinion.
Okay, just personally to comment on that, the argument that I've seen from G5 supporters is that once you do go start your own thing, it is sort of like the committee has won, I guess, and at that point there's no getting back in. Yeah, it would be nice to.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It would be nice to have maybe something. We would see Coastal Carolina playing Cincinnati at the end of the season, likely, if that tournament did exist, which would be a cool game to watch. But I mean, once you make that separation, I think you're cut off for good, and any chance at making a legitimate playoff in the future is kind of kaput. So, but interestingly, I did want to do this side by side really quick, since I still run the simulated BCS, or someone on Twitter does. The simulated BCS right now for the top 4 is Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Indiana, Georgia. Notice how Florida is sitting nowhere near that top 7 or 8. So, you guys agree with that more than the current rankings of the CFP, at least?
I actually do. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm more on that side now. I get that. I get that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a nice switch. But
yeah. Or if they could like use both, like have, let's take into account what these BCS ratings say and let's talk through it. I think that could go a long way as well.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe like some sort of 50-50 vote system, like how they have a fan vote. Committee can just turn into the fans, since that's what they seem to be here. And then our last buy or sell here, a little bit of NFL talk. Win or lose, Trevor Lawrence should stay at Clemson and forgo getting drafted by the lowly New York Jets. You buying or selling this, Andy?
I'm going to sell it. Well, I mean, at this point, I know he hasn't won a Heisman, but he's I don't want to say probably, because I'm picking Notre Dame this weekend, but he has an opportunity to go to the Final Four again. He's won a national championship, right? Or did they lose when he was in it?
Yep.
Yeah, he's 1-1.
1-1. Yep.
He's 1-1. Okay, so what hasn't he done at the college football level at this point that he could come back for his senior year and do? And who's to say if he does come back for his senior year, the Jets don't fucking suck next year and he's just stuck with them again. So I'm gonna sell this. I think when it comes to a college student who is thinking about going pro, the timing is everything. Go when your draft stock is the highest. If he's been talked about all year as the consensus number 1 pick, I think it's time you go to the draft, and then you worry about what team you're going to go to later. And I mean, the Jets are a pretty pathetic franchise. I mean, Thomas could tell us a lot about that. I'm sure he has some thoughts on the Jets, but same time, that's the big bright lights of New York City, and you're one of 32 dudes that could say they are a starting quarterback in the NFL. Plus, like I said, what does he have left to accomplish at Clemson?
Right. Yeah. I also am selling this. The win, I mean, the Heisman is important, but I think in this day and age, with how fast and how, I mean, I know hitting, targeting, all those kind of rules are now favoring the offense, but you never know how your longevity is going to play out as a player, especially as a quarterback, with how fast these edge rushers are getting. Like, you could get clobbered, and that could be the end of your season. We saw that happen with Dak Prescott this year. So I think you get in there as quickly as possible. Like you said, New York is a pretty marquee market, despite it being the Jets. And I think, I mean, I'm not an agent here, an NFL agent, but I think Trevor Lawrence almost has as much, if not more, of a pull, I guess, to sort of maybe pull that Eli Manning situation off and say, hey, I'm not going to play for you. You guys are that bad. We're going back to the Eli Manning period here, and I'm calling a switcheroo. So I think Trevor Lawrence does have that pull. I don't know if he'll do it, because New York is a massive market. Who's sitting just below them? Jacksonville right now?
Yes, it would be Jacksonville. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, even if New York is that much worse than Jacksonville, I'd probably be in New York. That's a big money market compared to Jacksonville. So I don't know. That's my personal take. I'm going to sell, and he should go get that money. Tom, what about you? Is he staying, or should he go to the Jets?
So, first of all, I mean, did we ever think we'd be talking about anybody besides Trevor Lawrence to win the Heisman? Is that in his mind? Sure. It's in his mind. But Tua Tagovailoa never won a Heisman. He never won a Heisman, and he's in the NFL. He left college early. Trevor's going to do the same thing. I get it. He's missed 2 games this year. His numbers aren't as wild as you'd like to see. Trevor Lawrence is a winner. Why would he want to play for the Jets, though? I think Brian brings up an interesting point. There's no guarantee he's going to play for the Jets, even if he does get drafted number 1. It could be a situation where the Jets like somebody else and trade back to get their guy, even if it's not Trevor Lawrence, or the Jets take somebody else with the number 1 overall pick. I mean, we kind of saw this last year where Cincinnati needed a quarterback and Joe Burrow was the number 1 overall pick because of Cincinnati's positional need. I'm selling this. Trevor Lawrence is going to the NFL draft, although he may not go number 1, whether it's on his own terms or the New York Jets terms. And again, we don't know who the number 1 pick is going to be in the NFL draft. So right now, Trevor Lawrence should forego his senior season and head to the pros.
Any sleeper picks to replace him there at number 1? You think for the Jets? We'll assume it's going to be the Jets. I don't see them winning anytime soon here.
It all depends on how they feel about Sam Darnold, and Adam Gase. I got a little crack out of Andy there, but
did you see that Sam Darnold said he wants to end his career as a Jet? And I saw that on Twitter, and all the quotes he was like, "Who's going to tell him?" So because I'm sorry, there's no way.
And Brian, to answer your question, there's a real chance that Gase is gone. I know this is a little off topic, but Gase leaves and Darnold stays because they want to see what Darnold could do with a new head coach and a better scheme around them. Now, how does this impact Trevor Lawrence? Well, he could end up in Jacksonville and the Jets take a player like Penei Sewell, or even if they do go the quarterback route and then like Justin Fields better, not because Fields is better than Lawrence, but because Fields maybe fits their system better as a quarterback. We're not going to know until we get closer to April, guys. We can butt heads and have this discussion for weeks to come. But I do think once we know what the final records are for each NFL team, we'll have a better gist of idea where Trevor Lawrence is probably headed.
Okay. All right. Everyone's selling on Lawrence staying, so likely to see him, or at least hopefully see him in the NFL next season. We'll move on now to our games of the week. Like I said, it is the conference championship week, so we got some good ones on the slate. Starting off at noon, our shot of the day, we have Northwestern taking on Ohio State and Lucas Oil Stadium. Northwestern doing pretty well, sitting at number 14. They have that loss to Michigan State a few weeks ago, but they've taken down Andy's Illini last week. Andy, I'm assuming you watched that game, so we'll start off with you with this one. You think Northwestern has a shot here?
Absolutely not. Ohio State's going to win by 30 points, and I'll book it. You can book that. And I'll try to let me be a little bit more neutral here because I did write down quite a few notes. But so really the thing will be, how will Justin Fields deal with this defense? This is a defense that has a lot of experience on the Northwestern side. They are the only Power 5 team in the country with 3 players currently on their defense with over 200 career tackles. Justin Fields really only struggled in one game this year, and that was the Indiana game. Other than that, he's been pretty phenomenal. He's completing 78% of his passes. He has 1,407 yards, 15 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and that's only in 5 games, folks. So it's doing pretty well. He's 107 for 37. He only has 30 incomplete passes on the year and over 100 completions. That's pretty damn good. I think if he had a full season, he would be right in the thick of that Heisman race. Northwestern's linebacker core is very experienced and actually one of the best in the country. They're led by senior Patty Fisher. You know, all 3 starting Wildcat linebackers are top 11 in the Big Ten in tackles this season. So it's Fisher, Blake Gallagher, and Chris Bergen are going to be the main guys you'll see for the Wildcats. And, you know, Patty Fisher is going to leave Evanston as one of the greatest Wildcats of all time. Currently has 383 total tackles and 11 forced fumbles for his career. Back to the Ohio State side of the ball, can Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson get loose, make some plays against this Northwestern secondary? And then what are you going to get from Trey Sermon and Master Teague? Can they get that ground game going? And then for Northwestern, you should be really afraid. Can you keep up offensively? You know, Peyton Ramsey, the Indiana transfer, and he's given the Wildcats consistency at the quarterback position so far this year. You know, he's 124 for 210, 1,218 yards, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So not great, though. If we're talking about last week, I mentioned it earlier, they had 2 players rush for 140 plus yards. The question for me is who's going to get the most carries, who's going to be the featured back for Northwestern. So Drake Anderson, a sophomore, leads the team in carries and total yards with 62 attempts for 256 yards and 2 touchdowns. But last week, he only had 1 carry for 4 yards against the Illini. Freshman Cam Porter, career high 24 carries for 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then freshman Evan Hull came in and ran 13 yards for 149 and a score. So if Ohio State's defense can stop the run, I think they win this pretty easily. I just don't see Northwestern keeping up on the offensive side of the ball. But look for Fisher and that defense to try to force a couple turnovers, put some pressure on Justin Fields, because I think that will be their only shot.
Speaking of that rushing attack, Ohio State notably only allowing 95 rushing yards per game. So, they're kind of in that zone where that is probably their bread and butter on defense. I think Northwestern, or at least for me, I'm not giving them much of a shot here. Their defense, like you said, has been very impressive. That core, that experience that they have has, I think, held them together this year. But Ohio State is they're dropping so many points. Justin Fields, I think, despite playing, I know I give Ohio State a little bit of shit for playing less games, but I think Justin Fields has been probably one of the more balanced and best decision makers of the season so far watching these games. Like you said, the Indiana game wasn't great, but they're just chugging along. And it looks like, so consecutive weeks they both played Michigan State. Like I said, Northwestern lost that game by 9 points, and Ohio State beat Michigan State by 40 points. So, a little bit of common opponent math there. It's not looking good, especially considering how recent those games were. So I'm giving it to Ohio State here, probably covering the spread as well. What about you, Tom?
So, can Northwestern cover the spread? Maybe. This Northwestern team, they're not going to score a lot of points, but they do have the second best scoring defense in the nation, giving up only 14.5 points a game. They have impressive wins on their resume, I guess, against Wisconsin and Iowa. Their defense has been great. Freshman defensive back who we didn't bring up, Brandon Joseph, 5 picks in 7 games. That's a little insane. Guys, we also have to play into account Ohio State's only played 5 games this year. Yes, they have the 4th best scoring offense, 45 points a game. I don't think they're scoring 45 points against Northwestern. I don't see it happening. I think there's a real chance that Northwestern might cover this spread. Now, they're not going to win the game, but there's a real chance they could cover the spread. And I'm telling you, the real question is Peyton Ramsey on their center. He's been very inconsistent this year. I'm not sold on him. If Northwestern had a better talent on their center, I think we could have a real conversation about them winning this game. But Justin Fields, Andy pretty much covered it. 78% of his passes completed. Master Teague, 6 touchdowns in 5 games. You're not going to stop that. You're just not. So Ohio State by around 17 to 20 points.
Do you guys think, before we move on to the next game, Northwestern, with that 1 loss, wins this game? Do you put them in as a Big Ten championship in the playoff?
They definitely have a case. If the committee thinks so highly of Ohio State, then they definitely have a case. Do I think they're one of the best 4 teams in the country? No. But that would cause some chaos. I don't know, but I think that would result in the Big Ten not getting in.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What about you, Tom?
It's probably going to be Texas A&M getting in if Northwestern wins, because it won't be enough to climb Northwestern, in my opinion, because you have to think about it. They're not going to put Cincinnati in. They're not going to put Florida in, considering they lose to Alabama. Who's the next team in? It's going to be Texas A&M by default. I'm sorry, but the SEC bias is there. We see it year in and year out. It's just not going to happen. Northwestern has 0 shot, regardless, win or lose, against Ohio State. They have a chance to crack the top 10, though. They really do. If there was an 18 playoff, we could be having this discussion.
Right.
But unfortunately, we're not.
I have to shout out Pat Fitzgerald, though. Pat Fitzgerald's a great head coach. As I'm saying this as an Illini fan, they are the premier football program in Illinois, which is fucking so unfortunate to say. We have basketball for sure, but this is their third Big Ten championship appearance, or no, I'm sorry, second Big Ten championship appearance in the last 2 years. We're saying that as a Northwestern team. Like that's if you look at the Big Ten West, beating out teams like Iowa, beating out teams like Wisconsin to get to Indianapolis. Now, are they going to win the title game? No. But I mean, good for them for being there and bouncing back from that losing season they had last year.
All right. And then moving on to the chaser in the noon slot, we have Oklahoma taking on Iowa State. Oklahoma ranked very highly. A surprise to me, at least, that they're sitting there at 6. Oklahoma sitting at 10. The game is at AT&T Stadium, happening at noon. Who do you have in this one, Tom?
So the line is Oklahoma favored by 5.5. Now, these two teams did meet back on October 3rd, a little over 2 months ago. Iowa State won that game 37-30. There was a lot of scoring, not a lot of punts in that game. Breece Hall went off. The nation's leading rusher had 2 touchdowns, 17 touchdowns on the year. But this is where it gets interesting. Spencer Rattler, who is a freshman, has improved a lot in the second half of the season, guys. You've seen it week in and week out. We didn't think Oklahoma was going to beat Oklahoma State. What happened? They won that football game. They're sitting here 7-2, favored to win this game. You got to give credit to him. TJ Pledger and Ramondre Stevenson split the carries for this team. And Marvin Mims, 7 touchdown catches on the year. It's going to be really tough to stop those guys. However, Iowa State, Brock Purdy has progressed throughout the year. He's only a junior, and their defense scares me, the Cyclones. You have Will McDonald, 8.5 sacks, Jaquan Bailey, 7. And Mike Rose is a really good linebacker for them, 81 tackles, 4 picks. Oklahoma needs to limit Breece Hall and hold Iowa State to under 30 points. They're going to do that. Give me the Sooners to get even and get their revenge against the Iowa State Cyclones. But it could go either way. I'm going Sooners.
Those sacks you brought up, I think will play a big part here. Like you said, Spencer Rattler, great improvement. 5 interceptions through their first 4 games. He's only thrown 2 in the next 5, so at least making better decisions on his end. But they've allowed 8 sacks in the last 3 games, and when you have 2 guys, 8 and 7 sacks in college football, when you're only playing, at least this season, around 10 games, that's pretty impressive. So if Oklahoma isn't protecting Rattler enough, this could be very problematic for him, despite the fact that he's sort of gotten into his groove. So it'll be interesting to watch there, that line play when Oklahoma's on offense. But yeah, between Purdy and Breece Hall here, I think they probably have the most impressive offensive weapons for this year. I mean, they're both in stride. They've been in stride all season, and neither has had to, I guess, sort of take over the team for one another. Neither has fallen off, at least that I've seen, tracking these Cyclone games, and they're just kind of making their own way together, production-wise. So I think I'm going to take Iowa State here. I think it'll be another high-scoring affair, probably higher than the last time, actually, despite the improved the improved defenses of both teams. But I don't know. I think this is one of the most interesting games for me because I think we could have, between this game, Northwestern, Ohio State, and the game we'll talk about here in a second, we could have the 4 playoff teams almost decided by 3 o'clock once this time slot ends. Andy, you taking the Cyclones here, or do you like these Sooners?
I don't know. I think this game was a toss-up. I went on my rant on my podcast last night about the Cyclones and how they shouldn't be at 6, although I do think they're a good football team. But, yeah, I'm going to take the Cyclones, actually. It's going to be a very high-scoring game, I believe. So last time these two teams met, there was 831 yards of total offense combined between those two, with Iowa State having 417 and Oklahoma having 414. So I think the question here is, can Oklahoma State stop Breece Hall? They have not allowed over 200 yards rushing in the last 15 games and have only allowed over 100 3 times. Breece Hall, I believe, went for about 130 the last time that they played. So that'll be very curious to see that matchup. Oklahoma also has the most sacks and the best defensive line, I believe, in the Big 12, and they're very good at putting pressure on the quarterback. They also lead the Big 12 in total offense. I mean, they're definitely not what we're used to seeing with the Baker Mayfields, the Kyler Murrays, and those guys, but I mean, they're good for well over 300 yards through the air for each game. I mean, Spencer Rattler is young. I'll be curious to see how he grows as a quarterback throughout the rest of his career, but Brock Purdy's having a really good year as well. He kind of started slow, but he's picked it up. If I get back to Breece Hall, he has slowed down a little bit. He's only ran for just over 90 yards in the last 2 games. So Texas and West Virginia were able to find a formula to kind of slow him down a little bit. I'll be curious to see what Oklahoma has planned this time after his 139-yard performance against the Sooners in the first game. I mean, but he has had a hell of a year, guys, with over 1,300 yards, 17 touchdowns, and he's averaging over 6 yards per carry.
Yeah, definitely an impressive year from Hall here. And then as a bonus, not here on the Shots and Chasers chart that you can see, but a bonus game. It's sort of like an encore here. We have Texas A&M taking on Tennessee to round out the, I guess, top 6, the last in, as we have Iowa State sitting at 6. Texas A&M is our 5th seed, and Ohio State at 4. And this game is also at noon. This encore game for them. Do either of you think any result here can sort of help the Aggies, or are they just kind of in limbo? This game doesn't matter. We're waiting on other results to, I guess, seal their fate, whether they get in or not. I'll start with Andy on this one.
I think absolutely the performance can dictate a spot in the playoff. They need to go in there and blow them out. They need to score as many points as they can. You need to look as good as you can for this playoff committee, because your game is going to be over, I believe, just as Ohio State's kicking off. Obviously, they're going to have to hope Northwestern stuns Ohio State. They're going to have to hope Notre Dame beats Clemson as well. But I think they absolutely have to have in their minds, okay, well, you can't go into the game being like, okay, let's be perfect and overthink it, because that's when I think mistakes start to come. But they need to be on it. Kellen Mond hasn't completed a lot of his passes this year. I shouldn't say that, but his pass completion percentage isn't as high as you'd like to see for an SEC quarterback, but they are able to run the ball pretty well. I mean, Tennessee's not very good. They do have their freshman quarterback that's taken over that hasn't looked bad. Tennessee's run defense isn't really a joke either. The only team that has really been able to do anything against the Volunteers on the ground was Bama. But, I mean, that's Bama being Bama with 5 scores and like 300 yards on the ground against the Volunteers. So the key to the game here is Texas A&M just needs to put it on them, and then Tennessee go in and play spoiler. You got nothing to lose really for this game, so why not go out there and try to ruin Texas A&M's shot?
Yeah, I definitely agree here. Just a slight correction. They're playing simultaneously to Ohio State and Iowa State here, and in that noon time slot.
Never mind.
Yeah, which I think that actually plays into your point more here, because when you have, say they were playing later at 3:30, you do have that advantage of saying, okay, we can dial it back a little, or, oh shit, we need to go balls to the wall here because so-and-so result happened. When these games are all happening simultaneously, yeah, you can look at the score, you can, check it on your phone, but making those transitions when you're already in a certain mindset, you've got that game plan, set in, it's very hard to do. So I do think it does play a little bit of a shot here, how they perform against Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee is a good enough win to do anything drastic, though. So in my opinion, I'm going to say they're going to have to wait on other results to boost them up there. Although, like you said, Kellen Mond, not a great completion percentage, but only 2 interceptions this season. 1 in the last 5 games. He's making at least decent decisions. His arm might not be very accurate, but at least he's not going to make any massive mistakes, or hopefully not make any massive mistakes here that'll put your game in jeopardy. So I think the game does matter a little bit. And it'd be nice to see Texas A&M actually, put an explosive offensive performance out there for once this season. And I think Tennessee might be a team that is fitting to do it against. So we'll see how that goes. Tom, does this game matter or not really?
100% it matters, because if you win, one of those teams loses, you're the first team. You're up next, in my opinion, regardless of what Florida does. They're realistically the only team that has a chance to unseat, because Northwestern's playing Ohio State. They're not playing anyone above them. Notre Dame and Clemson play each other. So as long as they win, just hope Alabama wins. And personally, I think they could be in if Notre Dame beats Clemson. So Kellen Mond, you know what you're going to get. Isaiah Spiller, you know what you're going to get. Tight end Jalen Weidermeyer has been great this year. You look at the defense, Bobby Brown and Michael Clemens, two forces in 8 games. And Leon O'Neal is a ball hawk in their secondary, did I mention. He is really fun to watch. And Texas A&M, not only do they carry a victory over Florida, they did beat LSU. Florida did not. And Texas A&M beat Auburn. So realistically speaking, they did have an opportunity, Florida, to get in. They didn't match what Texas A&M did. There's no way Florida's leapfrogging Texas A&M with a skin-of-their-teeth victory over Alabama tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. Texas A&M, this game is important because they have to do their job. Tennessee is not a pushover. They play a very difficult SEC schedule. They have a good pair of linebackers in Kavon Bennett, DeAndre Johnson, and Henry Tutu as well. So they're not a pushover. You have to play against them. The line's only 14. So they know the situation. This is very important for A&M for sure.
Yeah, Tennessee probably would love to play spoiler here. Moving on to our 3:30 and moving a little bit off of what you said here about them being, first in if Clemson does lose. Clemson versus Notre Dame at 3:30 on ABC and our ACC championship game. Tom, we'll start with you on this one as the Notre Dame fan. What do you think's going to happen in this rematch here?
So I think Notre Dame's going to show them a lot of Kyron Williams again. He had 3 touchdowns in the first game, including the eventual game winner. Somehow Clemson is favored by 10.5 this game. Starting DJ Ucla and Trevor Lawrence does not make a difference of 10.5 points. They lost with DJ at quarterback, who threw for 450 yards, containing Travis Etienne. Notre Dame has to do that again if they're going to win this game. They held them to 28 yards last time. Clemson couldn't run the ball on them, and they couldn't stop the run. It doesn't matter if you have Trevor Lawrence, DJ in there. If you can't stop Kyron Williams and Notre Dame, who arguably has the best offensive line in the entire nation, you are going to lose this football game. Notre Dame wins the trenches. Owusu Karamoa was all over DJ last time, and Ian Book had over 300 passing yards in that game. One of the top candidates for Heisman. I believe he's 5th right now. And he's only thrown 2 picks all year. The guy doesn't make mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Clemson, but Notre Dame has a very stout defense. They're only giving up 17 points a game average on the year. They are battle-tested. They played North Carolina. They played a tough game against Louisville. They've played Clemson for that matter. Trevor Lawrence or not, it's going to come down to Clemson's defense and if they can stop the run. Lawrence on the year has been good, but as I mentioned, it's going to be real tough. I think Amari Rodgers and Cornell Powell, though they're both seniors, they're big play threats. And, Balin Spector and Nolan Turner on defense, yes, that's a little concerning if you're a Notre Dame fan. But all in all in this game, Notre Dame has weapons of their own. Javon McKinley, Michael Mayer, and Ben Skoranek, right? Those guys all have a good amount of touchdowns and reps this season. I think Notre Dame has the better team all around. I just think this is the year. However, on paper, the line's 10.5. So you would come out and say, well, Clemson's probably going to win this game and get even, stick with 1 loss, and they're going to play in the college football playoff again. If you watch the film of that last game, Clemson couldn't stop the run for their life. And this game was not that long ago. This is 2020. The unthinkable happens. If you just think Clemson's going to win because you can't see them getting more than 1 loss, I think you're fooling yourself. And I do think Notre Dame wins this game, and it's going to be very close. And the people who made this line, regardless of who wins this game, they should be a little concerned about their own mental thinking.
Yeah, the line is actually what has thrown me on this game. I really I'm just lost
0
on
cents.
who to take here. I mean, my personal opinion here is that this is probably the most trustworthy top 4 Notre Dame team that we've seen in the playoff era. Um, in the past, I think it was 2017 when they snuck in.
2018, I think.
Okay,
2018.
2018. They snuck in and then got hammered. Before that game even started, I went into that game thinking they were going to get absolutely hammered. I look at this. Clemson is clearly a top 4 team, but I think Notre Dame has a very, very real shot to beat them again, regardless of the fact that Trevor Lawrence is back. Who, I mean, yes, Ucla had a pretty good game, especially getting in on such short-term notice. But I don't know how much more you can do than 450 yards of offense if you're Trevor Lawrence with how solid Notre Dame's defense has been. So, I mean, it's going to take a world-beating performance, I would think. I mean, maybe they just get it done through better production through ETN. Because, like I said, 450 yards, that's already pretty impressive through the air. So, yeah, I don't know. That 10, would you say it's sitting at 10 or 10.5 right now?
So it's 10 and a half.
10.5. It makes 0 sense.
Yeah, that's so rough.
Lawrence doesn't account for 10 points.
Yeah, I'm straight up. I think I might take Clemson here because they need the win worse. I feel like, spread totally out of control. I agree though. So if you're taking the spread, I think 10.5 points is a freebie almost. So I go Clemson straight up here. Notre Dame, if you like them with the points for that spread. Andy, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, so the line in this game makes absolutely 0 sense. Clemson is not 10.5 points better than the Fighting Irish. I mean, especially after losing 47-40 in double OT in this first meeting. Actually, that was my first appearance on this show. We previewed that Clemson Notre Dame game, and on that show, I said Kyron Williams was going to have to run wild, and he did. 23 carries for 140 yards, 3 touchdowns. Can he do that again? How will the Clemson Tigers defense deal with him? But I mean, what is Trevor Lawrence going to bring you that DJ didn't? Right. DJ Ucla in that game was 29 for 44 with 439 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is Trevor Lawrence going to come in and throw for 539? I mean, the defense is the one that lost him this game. That's what you should be worried about here. Obviously, they didn't get a lot from Travis Etienne. Anytime your feature running back, one of the best running backs to ever play in the ACC, has 18 carries for 28 yards, that's not a good look. He was kind of effective catching the ball out of the backfield with 8 catches for 57 yards. But Thomas, I think you'll find this interesting. 439 passing yards is a record for an opponent versus Notre Dame. So let's stop this narrative that Trevor Lawrence is worth 10.5 points. I think the first game Clemson was favored by 5.5. I'm not sure. So Trevor Lawrence buys them 5 more points. I just don't get that. Coming off a loss, this is just disrespectful for Notre Dame. I'm pretty sure you said it, Tom. I mean, they're undefeated. They're having their best year in quite a while, I guess, since 2012 when they got blown out. But I mean, the keys here for Clemson: do you get Travis Etienne going on the ground? What does he do after seeing this defense for once? I mean, and then I talked about Kyron Williams. I mean, if you look at his year, 180 attempts for 1,011 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per carry, 24 receptions out of the backfield for 268 yards and a touchdown. So not a huge threat, but definitely shown that he can catch the ball. And if you look at Etienne, 148 carries for 758 yards, also has 12 touchdowns, 41 receptions for 512 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's a little bit more versatile out of the backfield than Williams, but Williams outplayed him by a mile in that first game. I'll be curious to see who shows up. Clemson going for their 6th straight ACC title under Dabo Swinney, and Notre Dame going for their first ever conference title in any conference. So one of my last points here is Ian Book. I mentioned Patty Fisher at Northwestern. Ian Book's going to go down in Irish history. He's currently the most winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history with 30 career victories. He's having a really good year this year. 15 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's got 2,382 yards. I'm so fucking bad with numbers. And then 22 of 39 for 310 yards and a touchdown. What he did with his legs in that first meeting was what really impressed me, Thomas. 14 carries for 67 yards from Ian Book. I mean, can he take care of the ball in this game? That will be what I'm looking for. I mentioned only 2 interceptions. He did have a late fumble in that first meeting, ended up not mattering. The Irish ended up winning the game, but I think those are the big storylines for me here. I know I didn't mention a lot of defense, but I think this is going to be an awesome offensive football game.
Yeah, just one last note. Since you're talking about Ian Book, I don't know when this streak, I think it's not still going. But I remember back in November, Ian Book set the Notre Dame record for most consecutive passes without an interception. He had 230, which is quite a lot. And he passed, looks like Brady Quinn, who was at 226. So again, just very solid performance from him. And you went with Notre Dame as well, Andy?
Yeah, I'm going with Notre Dame. Let's go Irish.
And then in our chaser, unfortunately, this game has been canceled. Here we have the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. We're supposed to take on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, who have been a fan favorite of a lot of people here. COVID cases on Coastal Carolina, so we won't see the game. Who would you guys have had winning this game had it happened quickly? Andy?
I would take Coastal. Go with the Mullets, baby. I think what Grayson McCall's been able to do this year as a freshman is nothing short of impressive. You can talk about how this team was picked to finish at the bottom of the Sun Belt before the season started, and you're sitting here with a freshman quarterback, and you're undefeated at this point. Obviously, this really sucks. No conference championship game. You hope everybody in that program can get healthy, and there's no future problems with that. And then CJ Marable, what he's been able to do as well in the backfield has been awesome. And then it's just been a great story for Coastal. I definitely would have taken the chance here. They did beat ULL once before. And I'm not trying to take anything away from ULL because they're a very good football team as well. I mentioned them. It's ridiculous that they're at 19. They should be a little bit higher than that or closer to Iowa State. But yeah, I would have taken the Chanticleers here.
Same for me as well. All in on the Chanticleers. I think, despite not playing this game, I believe the committee has said that, considering the rankings, not that it really matters, I guess maybe for New Year's Six Bowl purposes, they said that they'll be considering the Chanticleers as the Sun Belt champions. I guess based solely on record. And I mean, they have the head-to-head anyway, so I don't think it matters. But regardless of what happens there, I think it's nice. They did sign an extension with their coach, Jamie Chadwell, who has been running an electric offense that's been very fun to watch. So I'm happy for them. Hopefully we'll see some good things from Coastal Carolina in the years that follow. Tom, were you riding with the Chanticleers here? How'd they play it, or Raging Cajuns were you guys?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm picking Coastal. Remember, I picked them to beat BYU, and that was kind of my upset that week, and they were able to pull it off. And, I think they would have won the Sun Belt. They were named co-champions, correct?
The conference named them co-champions. The committee says they'll consider the Chanticleers as the Sun Belt winners, I guess. Not champions.
And my last point on Coastal, guys, is we talked about Grayson McCall, but CJ Marable has been something else. He's been really great for them. So I'm looking forward to see what he can do in years to come, and maybe he'll make it pro. So we'll see what happens. It's a good young football team, and don't get me wrong, Sun Belt, not the toughest conference, but they could very well be in the top 25 again next year as well, in 2021.
I agree, especially they had those early season wins against the Big 12 as well, so that was nice for that conference as a whole. Then moving into our evening games, as our shot, we have the SEC championship game, probably maybe with the most on the line, I guess, with Alabama sitting at number 1, of course, probably the best team in college football right now, arguably. Florida Gators sitting at number 7. Following that, Marco Wilson yeeting of the cleat. As we'll say, Alabama's a 17-point favorite here. I think probably across the board we'll like Alabama, but you guys think they're covering that spread? Start with Tom on this one.
With the way Florida performed against LSU last week, you can say Bama easily covers the spread. I think Najee Harris, Mac Jones, and Devonta Smith are the three players you really need to hone in on with this team. And not to mention, sophomore kicker Will Reichard has been perfect this year. He has not missed a field goal. He has not missed an extra points. Let's give the kicker some love. Special teams is very important, and Alabama's kicker has been nothing but exceptional. Their defensive lineman, Christian Barmore, leads the team with 6 sacks. Will Anderson's been a beast for them too. 5 sacks. 5 sacks from a linebacker position in 10 games is pretty darn impressive. But Florida does have a lot of upperclassmen skill players that can make some noise in this game. Kadarius Toney with 9 touchdowns on the year, and Trayvon Grimes with 8. Not to mention the most important one, in my opinion, who Bama is probably going to have a little bit of trouble defending, Kyle Pitts, the tight end, 11 touchdown receptions on the season. If Florida can get this going with Kyle Trask, then they can very well cover the spread and keep it within a 1 to 2 possession game. But I don't think anything more than that. I think the spread is more what's in question here rather than the final result.
Yeah, I felt like asking heads up who you guys like might be a little bit too easy of a call here. Andy, what about you? Is Alabama taking the game and the spread?
I'd love to see Florida win this game. I just don't think it's happening, and I think you made great points, Thomas. I could see them staying within the number, but I mean, Alabama's only not covered the spread twice this year. Every other win has been by at least 18 points, I believe. When that hasn't happened, it's just been ridiculous. You said it. I think they are easily the best team in college football this year, especially from an offensive standpoint. I talked about Kyle Trask versus Mac Jones on the Heisman segment. I do think this is a Heisman matchup here, guys. Who do you like better? You know, Jones with his 3,321 yards, and Trask with his 3,717 yards, 40 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 27 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. But it's a toss-up for me as far as the spread goes. I'm really not sure how that's going to go, but it's how is Florida going to handle Devonta Smith and Najee Harris. I think their defense has been a little bit suspect this year. Definitely not the strong suit of the Florida Gators football team. I mean, Harris is just a monster, 183 carries for 1,084 yards, 22 rushing touchdowns on the year. He also can catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit, 27 receptions for 249 yards. No touchdowns there, but when he has caught the ball out of the backfield, he is gaining chunks of yards, averaging 9.3 yards per catch there. And then Devonta Smith is literally just seems unstoppable at times. Who do they put on him? Who's going to slow him down? I assume Marco Wilson will just try to take a shoe from him. That would probably be his best discourse of slowing down Smith. But yeah, he's been phenomenal. Like I said earlier, and like you said too, Brian, a dark horse Heisman candidate. Like if he goes off, if he has another 200-yard rushing or 200-yard receiving day with a couple touchdowns, does he enter his name in the conversation? You know, I think that could be an interesting storyline to watch. And then Kyle Pitts for Florida, can he get loose? He's a big play threat at the tight end position. They love running him up the seams. He's made a lot of great plays up the middle of the field. He's always a threat to score. He's averaging 17.8 yards per catch on the season. I think that's a pretty awesome stat. And then, Kadarius Toney has also had a great year for Florida. You talk about the senior receiver with 62 receptions, 831 yards, and 9 touchdowns of his own. So there are weapons on this Florida offense. This will be the question of how good is Bama's defense? Can they keep them above that number, above 17 points? I mean, we saw Ole Miss put up quite a lot of points on this Bama defense earlier in the year. So it'll be curious. I'm just hoping for a good game. If it is going to be a blowout, I'd like Florida to blow them out, but it's just not happening.
You hope everyone has fun there.
Yeah. I think Bama's going to win. But let's go Gators in honor of my good friend Ryan Maloney, who actually had to go into hiding after that game this last weekend.
Yeah, I 17 seems like quite a high number. I mean, it's probably about correct. But like you said, you just mentioned Ole Miss, and also Texas A&M, the Alabama defense struggled with. We talked about Mond earlier. He's not the greatest. He's a little consistent, but he's not, shouldn't be making those big ball plays against you. And who's Ole Miss, I think, is Matt Corral was starting that game for Ole Miss. They kind of shredded Alabama in that game, which was a little bit unsuspecting. I think Trask is much better than both of those QBs. So if you're going to give up that kind of, offensive production to those, we'll call them lower tier QBs, I guess, you could be in trouble if Kyle Trask, especially with Kyle Pitts back and pretty healthy, get going on you. I think Alabama's offensive line is probably the best in the nation. And if they can build that hole early to feed Najee the ball and really spread that offense out, I think they're dropping 50-plus points on Florida. And the only question for me is going to be whether Florida can respond, whether they can follow up in the midst of, the Aggies and Ole Miss scoring, I think, around mid-30s. If not, this could get out of control fast. So I think 17, I would probably still take Alabama here. Yeah, I think it'll be a fun game. I'm not as optimistic as you, Andy, about, wanting Florida to blow them out. I mean, obviously that would help the Big Ten here with Ohio State. Makes the argument a little bit easier, but I just don't see it happening here. I think Alabama's probably going to run over these Gators who have that tail between their legs after losing to a very, very questionable LSU team. We'll see. This is going to be my game to watch, I think, just because I think it's a very big test for Alabama ranking-wise. They've got a top 5 win against A&M, so we'll see how they do against another top 10 team here. Should be a good game to watch. And then as our chaser, if you really don't want to watch Florida likely lose by a lot to Alabama, we have the AAC championship. Tulsa and Cincinnati finally playing. Third time's the charm here. Both regular season games got canceled. First game was canceled for COVID. Rescheduled, canceled. Now they're skipping straight to the conference championship game. Cincinnati has been off for a few weeks here. Who do you think takes this game, Tom?
So this game will be at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati. Let's keep that in mind. They're favored by 14.5, 8-0, undefeated on the year. Now, Tulsa, they started out 0-1. They've won 6 straight. Tulsa's a team, they use a 3-headed running back attack. Deneric Price, Corey Taylor, and TK Wilkerson. They have a good wide receiver in Josh Johnson as well, who has 6 touchdowns. I like the way he creates separation against some of the corners that they've played against in that conference this year. Zavin Collins as well is an outstanding linebacker for them. 52 tackles, 4 sacks, as well as 4 picks. 2 of them returned for touchdowns, which is incredibly tough to do. My question for Tulsa is their quarterback situation. Zach Smith was very hot and cold this year. I'm not the biggest fan of his. And not to mention, Cincinnati has the 5th best scoring defense in the nation. That's going to be very tough to overcome, in addition to playing in Cincinnati, going up against a Desmond Ridder led team, has 27 total touchdowns on the year, including passing and rushing. Not to mention Jared Dokes, Josh Weil. Those guys are going to be really tough to contain for Tulsa's defense. And I really like what Cincinnati presents defensively with Majai Sanders, those 5 sacks, Jarrell White, good leader at the linebacker spot. So give me Cincinnati. It's going to be a very, very difficult game for Tulsa to come out on top on, just because Cincinnati has the field familiarity going for them as well, in addition to Desmond Ridder, and they're a great defense. So I'm going to take the Bearcats here, and I take them very comfortably.
Yeah, something that the AAC does do is the leader of the conference does get that home field advantage, which in the past as a UCF fan, I can tell you does play a big role. Helped UCF take down Memphis a few years ago in an absolute score fest down to the wire. Obviously, I mean, I don't know what Ohio is doing specifically with regards to fans, if they're, half capacity, 25%, whatever. But every little bit helps. So being at Nippert definitely adds to that advantage here. I'm not sure earlier in the season if this was Andy or somebody else, but I did say Tulsa can be a giant killer as far as the AAC goes. And someone said, who's scared of Tulsa? My answer is everyone should be scared of Tulsa. Tulsa has taken down UCF. They took down SMU. I think the Oklahoma State loss, 16-7. It's still a loss, but it's not terrible for a team that's pretty good in the Big 12. And now we get to see them go against Cincinnati, who's, I think, by far the best team, but just had that scare a few weeks ago against UCF, down to the wire, 36-33. Yeah, I think you pretty much covered all the spots there, Tom, of the important players here. Ritter is probably too much of a key player. He's been, I watched in depth that UCF Cincinnati game because I just wanted to get a sense of how good UCF was as a team. We're pretty young here, but still decent. And I want to see how he stacked up against the Bearcats. And I can tell you, he played very, very well against our defense that's been improving a bit. And I think we're still a little bit better than Tulsa despite that loss. But yeah, I think Ritter's just he's too much. He's too effective with his legs for Tulsa to be able to stop him both on the ground and through the air. So I'm taking Cincinnati here at home. I think they run away with the AAC championship and, maybe get a little boost in the rankings here. I don't think committee's going to give them too much love because Tulsa will drop out of the rankings if they lose this game, most likely. But hey, maybe we'll see Cincinnati in the 8th spot, and we can say, what if about an 8-team playoff here. Andy, who's your call on this game?
Yeah, I'm going to ride with the Bearcats. This will be one of the toughest tests for the Bearcats defensively, or I should say one of the best defensive teams they have played, which they really haven't played a lot of good defenses. They did play Army earlier in the year, who's 3rd in national total defense. And in that game, the Bearcats only scored 24 points and had 331 total yards. But the next best defense they played was Houston, who's ranked at 71st. Tulsa comes in at 20th best in the nation, and I think they're going to need a big night from their defense, and that's anchored by Zaven Collins, guys. 6'4", 260 in the AAC as a linebacker. You just don't see that a lot. He's 2nd on the team with 51 total tackles, 4 of those being sacks and 11.5 tackles for loss. He did seal their overtime win over Tulane. That was an absolute thriller. I believe I mentioned it on this show before. One of the best college football games of the year. He had a 96 pick 6 in overtime to win the game 30-24 and cover the spread. That was quite a night for me. But that is going to be their chance because Cincinnati, they love to control the time of possession. They love to run the ball. You mentioned Desmond Ritter. Actually, he's been very good throwing the ball. Last year, he only completed 55% of his passes, guys. This year, he's up to 67%. That's a 12% improvement. That's awesome. I think he's just had a great year. And you mentioned, Tom, what he's able to do with his legs as well. If they let him get loose, it could be a long day. Tulane, they don't really care about the time of possession. Not Tulane, I'm sorry. Tulsa, they don't really care about the time of possession. They'll just try to score as quickly as they can when they get the ball. But look for Ritter and look for Dokes to try to pound the rock here. And I do think Cincinnati wins this game, especially at home. Most hype they've had around their team, and who knows how long. Need this game to have any chance of the playoff. It's probably not happening. But go undefeated. It's going to be a lot better than dropping a conference championship game at home.
Right. Yeah. It'll be nice. I had the word has left me, but the pleasure, I guess, the pleasure of seeing 2 undefeated UCF teams. And as much as I would have liked us, to win the conference this year. Seeing Cincinnati undefeated at this point, I would like to see him, beat that third team, because I think, as much as I want to hate him, having 3 AAC champions go undefeated in a 5-year span, the AAC is usually in there as they joke about the Power Six, but it probably is the 6th best conference. So 3 undefeated teams in that quick of a span will be nice. And I think most notably, I'll ask you guys this because you're both living up north. We had that nor'easter, I guess, run through you guys, or at least the northeast there, with some pretty shady weather. This game at night, but it's still looking to be in the 40s. Do you think, had the weather, been a couple days later, and we see some snow at Nippert, that would have given Tulsa a little bit better of a chance? Because that snow, to me, especially in college, will throw any team off. I know Cincinnati's a northern team up in Ohio, so I'm sure they're used to the snow. But yeah, anything can happen with snow. So do you think that might have helped Tulsa a little bit there, if they could have had Mother Nature on their side, or no?
I don't think so. I think it plays into Cincinnati wanting to run the ball and pound the rock more. You're not going to throw the ball as much in the snow. And I mean, I don't know. I haven't really been to Oklahoma, but are they getting a lot of snow and experiencing the cold down in Tulsa? I think the guys up at Cincinnati would have probably been practicing out there. Well, actually, they're probably not practicing outside. They're probably practicing at the indoor facility. But I don't put too much on that. I get that it is another variable, and it puts a little bit more chaos on the game, probably more opportunity for turnovers or mistakes. And players that are coming up in off the sidelines aren't going to be as fresh, and their muscles are going to be a little bit colder. That could play a factor, but I think it would play into Cincinnati's hand. Just wanted to run the ball more.
Okay, yeah, I just had to ask as a Floridian, because as you can see, maybe as you cannot see, but I'm in a sweater here. It's only in the 40s down here in Florida, so to me, any type of snow, I feel like, would throw off my game. Tom, would that snow have helped him, or still Cincinnati rolling in that scenario?
I mean, both teams would have to go through it, so no. And then, Cincinnati, obviously, playing in their own stadium again, it's not really going to give Tulsa much of an advantage. I mean, it could alter Cincinnati's game plan, but Tulsa would be going through the same issues. So, no. I mean, Cincinnati's just the better team. There's no other way to really put that, but you never know. You never know. Like, any given Saturday, guys, anything can happen.
Yep. Sorry, Tulsa. I tried to help you out there, but nobody is.
Sorry, Tulsa.
Cincinnati, just the better team. That'll wrap up our games of the week. Thank you for joining us this week for our conference championship show. If you want to check out the links in the description, we will have Andy on this side, Tom on this side. There are links down below, along with ours, our Twitter, all that good stuff. And if you want, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys all next week. Thank you for joining us.